All right, we're going to begin the next session, which is looking at STEM workforce shortages across the federal government. I'm reminded of an old line from Carl Sagan, who said he talked to kindergartners and they were just bubbling over with questions like, why do we have toes? What's the age of the world? And he said, and then I talked to high school students and it was dead silence. And he said something horrible happened in between, and it wasn't just puberty. Joking aside, this is a really serious issue, but that anecdote does highlight the point. And so before I hand the floor over to Vic to moderate the panel, let me say a huge thank you to our four guests. This is a whole of government issue as we think about how we find and address not the shortage of talent, but the shortage of encouragement and opportunity for talent across the country. And part of that is about understanding the needs, not just in an academic and industry context, but also in a government context. And many of us who spent time working in a variety of different government contexts and know that that shortfall is very real and depends on us cultivating domestic talent. And there are cases where Congress has certainly given NSF direction with CyberCorps, but we have a chance today to hear from some thought leaders from other agencies, and I'm really looking forward to this conversation. So thank you all for being willing to be here. And with that, I'll hand the floor over to Vic to introduce our panelists and take it away. Vic?
All right. Thank you, Dan. Before we start, I'd like to ask all the board members and others in attendance to please turn off your cameras and mute your microphones during the presentation. So, good Monday morning, and welcome to what is going to be a timely panel, Tuesday morning.
I was going to say it's Tuesday,
timely for all of us here today. Now that I have your attention on the STEM workforce shortages across the federal government, and there were some compliments as well as comments that were said early on. And so, we are in a Sputnik 2 moment. Talking personally, I am a child of the National Defense Education Authorization Act. When my parents looked up into the sky, they were both Army, sorry, Paul, and they said, wow, they've launched a satellite, the Russians, what are we going to do about it? And all of a sudden, hundreds of millions of dollars poured into the public education school system. And that's how I got involved in science and many, many others. And so also, Suresh Garamella, you said coordination. And I think that's important. So right now, it seems what we've got here at this panel to talk about this U.S. STEM talent and workforce development, not only on a longstanding interest of the board, but as articulated in NSB's 2018 Skilled Technical Workforce Report and our 2020 Vision 2030. Thank you again, Roger, for that summary. But also a priority of Congress, most recently through the CHIPS and Science Act. And I want to give a lot of kudos, first of all, to the board for being behind these reports, both the Vision, the Skilled Technical Workforce, or AKA Blue Collar STEM report, as well as the leadership of NSF for Ponch and your team who embraced the Skilled Technical Workforce and the Vision and this whole action about talent. I can't tell you everywhere we go when we go up on the Hill, whether it's with board members, Dan and I, colleagues, other folks, and we start to talk about a technology interest, and it slowly turns around to say, you know what? We've got facilities. We've got all the cash we can print. Okay, we've got curriculum. But none of that means anything, even with our strategies, if we don't have the people and the talent to make that happen. So, and most recently with the CHIPS and Science Act, that has been highlighted. A lot of credit to Francis Collins and Maria Zuber. And they've asked the board, they came to us when we met them, okay, you've talked about the skilled technical workforce, you talked about talent, but even now there's an added dimension, which you all may cover, is about the cleared technical workforce. So a driver of this bipartisan legislation included a growing concern that the U.S. is facing massive shortfalls of STEM workers in critical fields at all educational levels. These shortfalls of diverse domestic STEM talent, in particular, threaten our national security, our chance to innovate, and translation of scientific breakthroughs into products, goods, and services for this country. At our 2022 December panel, we heard from leaders in critical technology sectors about their STEM workforce needs. I should point out we had someone who was also from the Office of the Secretary of Defense, and they said we need everybody, from plumbers to PhDs, from electricians to electrical engineers. And I think one thing that kind of startled some of our members of our board here was they were talking about we need welders and that they could start at $175,000 a year. And so how do we get that message out to vast parts of the country that there's opportunity everywhere? Today, we'll hear from a complementary panel of experts who will articulate workforce needs within federal agencies themselves. Our panelists are here to share their common national security and economic perspectives, agency-specific data where applicable, including training and educational requirements for their workforce. On behalf of the board, I would like to thank our panelists for joining us today for this important conversation. And again, Suresh, this may be start of that coordination idea that you brought up. It's extremely important because no one agency, no one person, even with all the effusive energy of the director of NSF, we have to marshal everybody together. So let me introduce our panelists. Our first panelist is Chavonda Jacobs-Young, who serves as the U.S. Department of Agriculture's Undersecretary for Research, Education, and Economics, and as the USDA's Chief Scientist. Undersecretary Jacobs-Young oversees REE's 5 organizations that collectively advance agricultural research, innovation, data, and extension addressing agricultural's highest priorities, such as climate-smart agriculture, nutritional security, and strengthening of the food supply chains. We are really thrilled to have you joining us today for your perspectives from USDA. And because I remember meeting you at the APLU conference last fall, you're advocate of both our 1862 and 1890, and I challenge all board members to at least visit an 1890 institution. I know you have. Okay, land grant institutions. Our second panelist is U.S. Navy retired Vice Admiral Paul Sullivan. He reports to the Undersecretary of Defense, currently a senior Navy civilian, advising the leadership team that designs, acquires, builds, tests, and sustains submarines for the U.S. Navy. Vice Admiral Sullivan's illustrious career includes, among others, being the executive director of the Applied Research Laboratory at the Pennsylvania State University, which is a university affiliate, a research center. There's 14 of them around the country, I believe now 15, an extremely important partner that can help with NSF and what we do. Vice President for Operations and Chief Engineer and Vice President for the American Centrifuge Projects at UESC Incorporated, and Vice Admiral in command of the Naval Sea Systems Command, or as we functionally say, NAVC, which employs tens of thousands of civilian scientists and engineers. A good place where a lot of our students can go to. I'm pleased to have him here to discuss DoD STEM workforce needs. Our third panelist is Deputy Surgeon General, Rear Admiral Denise Hinton, who advises and supports the U.S. Surgeon General regarding operations of the U.S. Public Health Service, Commission Corps, and in communicating the best available scientific information to advance the health of the nation. Previously, Rear Admiral Hinton served as Chief Scientist and held other various leadership positions at the Food and Drug Administration and served in the U.S. Air Force as a nurse officer. I am delighted to have you join our panel on the workforce of the U.S. Public Health Service. I'm also delighted that you are the boss for my wife, Captain Mercedes Benitez McCrary, and I'm also heartened because my mother was an Army nurse. So very good. You bring the talent here in that perspective. Our fourth and final panelist is Melinda Higgins, Director of STEM Programs in the Office of Nuclear Energy at the Department of Energy, where she works to enhance access to STEM opportunities for all, a board priority too. And I'm so glad that the board, I'm so glad to hear Ponch and the foundation that, as we've always said, talent is everywhere, but access is not for all. And that's extremely important. And to raise awareness of STEM careers for economic development, particularly in the nuclear energy fields. She continues a long-standing effort to support tribal interest and efforts in STEM outreach and engagement in collaboration with the tribal working groups. We are really thrilled to have DOE represented on this panel and look forward to her presentation. Now, at the end of the presentations, we do invite board members, and I really do invite you to ask the questions, some which have already been started when we talked about Vision 2030, of how we go forward and develop our nation's diverse domestic STEM talent. And so at that end, you can then turn back your cameras and we'll start the Q&A. I will now turn to Chavonda to start her presentation. Chavonda, please.
Good morning, everyone. Press the button. There we go. Good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
All right, fantastic. That's how we do it in Georgia. So thank you so much for inviting me today to talk about federal STEM workforce needs in agriculture. Slide 1 outlines some of the challenges and provides a context which I hope will be supportive of the comments I'll make a little bit later and during the course of this conversation. The challenges that we're facing in agriculture are considerably large in scope and gravity. As the complexity of our world and problems increases, the need for bringing together a diverse background.
There we go.
Not sure it likes me there. I'll start again.
No, you're
okay.
Good.
Yep, I'm good. Thank you. As the complexity of our world and problems increases, the need for bringing together diverse backgrounds and disciplines becomes more imperative than ever before. And so this isn't our grandparents' agriculture. Gone are the days when an agronomist in a single laboratory can solve the major problems that we have in feeding the world. And we need the best and the brightest to provide cross-disciplinary approaches and solutions. On any given team in an agricultural lab across the country these days, you'll find, yes, agronomists, and also biologists, entomologists, groundwater specialists, microclimate scientists, and air quality experts, teaming with social scientists, bioinformaticists, drone mechanics, registered dietitians, and yes, welders and plumbers. Agriculture today requires interdisciplinary vision and innovation on a grand scale. This is definitely not our ancestors' agriculture. We need all hands on deck developing creative, sustainable, and strategic plans to feed the future. Now, I believe that with great challenge, however, comes great opportunity. And we have this, right? Because this is what we as scientists do. We adapt and we innovate. This graph shows the fruits of the scientific innovation in agriculture over the past 75 years. Between 1948 and 2019, total agricultural output in the United States grew by 142%. We provided arguably the world's safest, nutritious, and most abundant food supply with the same or fewer inputs. Public investments in ag research has yielded great returns, yet we fall behind. Once the world's leader, the United States now trails other major nations in public agriculture research investments, declining by a third in the past 2 decades. This loss of investment firepower means we are potentially missing opportunities to capitalize on the potential of our world-class scientists to conduct the type of research necessary to meet the rapidly emerging challenges our farmers face. That's why I'm pleased that President Biden and Secretary Vilsack are committed to supporting federal agriculture research, development, and deployment, which will shape and define innovation for decades to come. And the administration and Congress have shown support for STEM education and workforce. Recently, the $262.5 million Next Gen program at USDA is a great example of that dedication. Our co-chairman talked a little bit about the 1890s. USDA works with the 1890s, which are historically Black colleges and universities, our 1994s, which are our Native serving institutions, our HSIs, which are Hispanic serving institutions, and of course our 1862s, which are our major land grant universities. The Next Gen program was launched partially in response to the graying of agriculture. Here you see that the average age of agricultural rural populations has vastly skewed towards senior citizens. including a rise in the average age of our producers. Currently, the average age of our producers across the United States is average age 58. So our farmers are average age 58. And over 35% of them are over the age of 65. These next charts keep me up at night. And here you see the number of retirement eligibles in USDA and the projection of how much that number will grow in the coming years. 3 of the top 5 professions eligible for retirement are STEM positions: our food safety and grain inspectors, our biologists, and our lab technicians. And although 2 of the top 5 are what we would consider administrative positions, HR and procurement, from my 22 years of federal scientific experience, I can tell you it is difficult maintaining the scientific enterprise when these administrative positions are not well staffed. And we are much better served when our administrative personnel, particularly in hiring and purchasing, have some STEM background or knowledge. Makes our lives just a little bit easier. All of these people are eligible to retire. And we need to replace some of them, sure, with the same backgrounds. And for some of those positions, they need to be reimagined. For example, to ensure we're moving ag research forward at a sufficient pace, we need many more computer and technology specialist fields: bioinformatics, computer modelers, artificial intelligence experts, machine learning experts. We continue to need PhD DVMs at a rapid pace. This need is a historical one, and it increases with the biosecurity demands that we are faced with today. Just think about COVID-19, the coronavirus, the zoonotic disease. Biosecurity is at an utmost level of importance. We need more students trained in this field. Every time I talk with students, college students, 4-Hers, even the grade school kids with an interest or who have a love for animals, I urge them to become veterinarians. And I know cats and dogs and our companion animals are extremely important, but I try to skew them toward large animals. So we need students trained to work with cattle, with swine, with our agricultural animals. And so a final note I'd like to make is about the diversity of the ag sector. The Next Gen program, developing the next generation of diverse agriculture professionals, is explicit about this, focusing on minority-serving institutions and students from underserved populations. And I love what my boss, Secretary Vilsack, says on this topic. We need our workforce to resemble the diverse populations that we serve. We need some solutions in recruitment and retention, however. In USDA, we hire over 1,000 students, research associates, postdoctoral candidates, and seasonal employees annually through use of varied and various accepted non-competitive appointing authorities and university partnerships. And simultaneously, we recruit for and hire an average of over 600 external positions via traditional competitive direct hire and pathways authorities. Now, many of these students and postdocs work alongside our scientists, technicians, and professionals. Think about a postdoc, up to 4 to 5 years in some cases. Our challenge is not having a direct path to convert those, for example, postdocs to federal employees. I think they've had the longest probationary period on earth. So employment for existing students and postdoctoral researchers would be a wonderful opportunity. Now, Pathways interns and some of our federal employees and our colleagues in the room know about Pathways, and our Reach with Graduate programs and other traditional competitive efforts require substantial HR support. And for our needs, they provide a low success rate for the types of positions that we hire in science. Now, we've assessed and field tested with new recent OPM recent graduate and intern authorities to convert students, but this avenue has also proven to be labor intensive and does not effectively meet our scientific mission needs. At USDA, we're exploring opportunities to leverage non-competitive conversion for graduate students, more specifically postdocs, and a mechanism to convert more interns and recent graduates into mission-critical STEM, scientific support technician, administrative, and professional positions would be welcome. So I will end here and thank you for the opportunity to join you today for this very important topic.
Thank you, Chavonda. Appreciate that very much. While we're waiting for the next speaker slides to come up, just want to say thank you for the point about also mentioning we need contract specialists, we need grant specialists, we need people who understand the uniform guidance as well as the FAR and DFAR, but also a new generation that also kind of have a STEM background when they're managing these things, because it's extremely important. So this is very, very, very good. Thank you for that. Next, we have Paul. And Paul, as soon as your presentation is up, please go ahead, and there it is.
Okay, great. Can you hear me now? Okay, well, good morning, and thanks, Vic, for putting me on this panel. It's an honor to be here today to represent DOD. My theme today will be similar to what you've heard already in this morning session and from Chavonda. Workforce development and renewal across the defense industrial base, and I mean the industrial base, with both government and our suppliers and contractors, to me is a national security imperative. I want to talk three concepts today in support of that. First is just kind of a brief snapshot of what's happened to our defense workforce across, again, contractors, industry, suppliers, and in the government. And then my field is submarine design and construction, and I'll give that as a microcosm of what we have in the defense industrial base. And then finally, I want to beat the drum on diversity as a source of it's a kind of a national weapon that we have that few other countries do have. Next slide, please. Okay, let's talk a little bit about the core issues that are facing the defense workforce. I'm not going to read the slide here, but you can see our median age is pretty high, and our retirement eligibles are also high. We've done decades of offshoring, and so we're facing broad spectrum need to develop and revitalize this workforce. And it is, as was in the December panel, from, was it plumbers to PhDs? So I had, in my notes, I had from skilled trades to PhDs. And I view the skilled trades as part of the STEM workforce. These folks have to bring their A game every day. That welder that makes $175,000 may take 10 years to develop. The kids on the other end of that, the apprentice welders, they can make the same salary as a barista at Starbucks. And it's hot in the summer and it's cold in the winter, and the work is very difficult, especially if you're working on submarines. So, and as far as desirability of our defense, SpaceX and the aviation industry are generally more in demand from our graduates coming out of school. And so the defense industry on both the government side and on the I'll call them the big six, Lockheed Martin, Boeing, you know who they all are. Our security clearances are an obstacle, because when we go to a job fair in the government, it's hey, fill out your SF-171, fill out your SF whatever, and we'll get back to you in a couple of months when we make sure that you have you're not a security risk to the United States government. Whereas at the next desk, it's, I'm hiring you for 1.5 times the salary the government was going to hire you, and I'll give you a signing bonus, and we'll figure out where you're going to work, whether we need a security clearance for you or not. So the government is in competition with our own supplier base for and this, I'll call it's a fight for talent. In addition, has anyone tried to negotiate the government website for jobs? Jobs.gov. It's just, I've got kids who've changed, like many millennials. My kids change jobs every so many years, and just they look at the government websites and it's, oh, forget it. I'll go somewhere else. Slide, please. Let me just zoom in on my world. In this sector, we're facing also a generational workforce challenge and a generational increase in our workload, as you can see on the upper right. And in this world, you need to bring your A game every single day, from that apprentice welder all the way up to the PhD certifier of the boat. Consequences of failure in this world are grave, as just exampled last month by the loss of that research, tourist deep submersible, right? And we are driven by safety concerns. This slide really represents the construction base at our two shipbuilders that build submarines for us. But there are also 4 naval shipyards that are government-owned, government-staffed, that are also a part of the sustainment piece of the submarine ecosystem. So this workforce has suffered a backbreaking decline from 1992 all the way out to about 2010, where 2/3 of our jobs went away. And in some of the sectors, more than 80% of the jobs were lost. As far as our supplier base, we went from 13,000 to 15,000 suppliers in the late 1980s down to about 3,000. My workforce in the engineering directorate at Naval Sea Systems Command, before I took the place over, I was the chief engineer. We had 1,300 crack engineers who designed first-rate ships and submarines in the late 1980s. When I took the job, we were down to 365, and I lost another 100 the next year in 2002. And now we have that workforce starting to grow again, but as you know, with seasoned engineers, many of the problems that we face, it's their first time to the rodeo, and they don't, we may have these numbers, but we don't have the experience. The skilled veterans that carried us through the drawdown of the 25-year peace dividend all retired in the last 15 years. And again, so now we're developing, what does this skilled workforce look like? Our trade supervisors, the average at Electric Boat, for example, is between 4 to 5 years, as opposed to 10 to 15 years in the 1980s and 1990s. And as our adversaries have come on to an extent militarily that we never imagined in 1995 when we closed 4 of our 8 naval shipyards, the demand signal for submarine force in particular is very, very high. It carries 70% of our strategic deterrent. It's undetectable, and they're on patrol every day. Similarly, technology has transformed in our world, especially in the advanced manufacturing techniques that are permeating the industry today. But our workforce isn't trained in those, and so we need a huge training program, not only in the trades skills that are needed to manipulate and understand and exploit the new technology, but also in the engineering workforce that needs to be able to confidently certify the products that come out of our industry. We're investing heavily in this, don't get me wrong. There's a lot of money going to this right now, but we still need a strategy for rapid acquisition of deep domain expertise and a whole of government approach. You've heard that already, whole of government approach to broad-based pipelines to get our kids into this business. Finally, it's pretty clear to me that we're not accessing all the available talent. All right, so we've said, oh my gosh, it's a national crisis. We don't have enough people. I believe we have enough people. We're just not accessing all the brains we need. Okay, so somewhere between that 4th grade that Sunesh mentioned and the exciting world that I live in here, there's a big filter, and we got to go work on that filter. What is one of our key critical weapons? Next slide. In that fight for talent, I want to tell you, in my experience, diversity across the board is a very, very key weapon. I'm a weapons guy, so it's a key weapon in our fight. From where I sit, we're locked in a strategic battle for our way of life, and it's cultural and economic and intellectual leadership. We are locked in a battle with our adversaries. We can't outspend them, some of them. We're not going to outspend our key adversary in the technology world. And we're not going to take our whole of government approach and just bend it to defense at the expense of the rest of industry. So what do we got to do? We've got to go out innovate our adversaries. And in the defense world, out innovating your adversaries, and then that bringing that to bear across those pictures at the beginning of my pitch here, where our defense, these are our kids, these are our brothers and sisters that are flying airplanes and going into space and diving beneath the waves in defense of our country. We've got to out innovate our adversaries in order to do that. And the best innovation from my personal experience, here's a picture of my team at ARL Penn State. This is my autonomy team. It's not just the diversity of race, gender, ethnicity, and gender preference. It's also, as we mentioned before, it's the teamwork of the various disciplines that have to come into a team to go get something done. But we do have some barriers to this innovation. And, let me just thump on the drum a little bit for diversity. First off, there's a bias against STEM jobs. There's a bias against manufacturing jobs. I grew up in a community where no of our high school graduates went into the trades. That was the dirty work. So we have to overcome that bias into the manufacturing sector. We also have barriers to that good elementary and high school education. I think that's already been mentioned. And then finally, and I think this hits home base with the National Science Foundation. In my last job at ARL Penn State, I probably signed 5 to 6 proposals a day. You go into a minority serving institution where professors and researchers are working very, very hard. If anyone is taught 2 classes in a semester, that's pretty much the norm. Okay, go try to have a polished proposal process for that. We've got to go figure out how to make our grant system accessible to minority serving institutions, and I throw that out for help because I don't know how to do it. So those are some thoughts for you, and I would like to just summarize. National security issue, I do work in national security. In my world, it's critical, and we need to bring our A game every single day, from the apprentice welder all the way to the PhD certifier. And if we're not working on diversity, we're accessing about 40% of the brains that we need to get into our, to work on this fight we have for intellectual, cultural, and technical leadership. Thanks.
Thank you, Paul. And while we wait for the slides to come up for our next speaker, I would invite and ask Paul for your help. Last year, I had a chance to go on the USS Montana down at the Norfolk Naval Yards.
How did you like my boat?
I loved your boat. I love the Microsoft Xbox controller in the control room to reach that next generation. But I would invite all of the members, and Paul, as you as a tasker, that if we have an opportunity to have you tour the Norfolk Naval Yards or wherever you are, and to be able to go there and talk to some of the people, because the main conversation I had beside the technology was talent. Where do we get the talent, okay, to staff these boats and to get out there? So I would invite that. And Paul, if we get some folks, if you want to sign up, come to me and I'll come to you afterward. Okay. Now we turn to Denise. Denise?
Well, I would say thank you, Mr. McCrary, for that warm introduction. And I really wanted to say good morning to my co-panelists here and fellow colleagues. And I also to the board members. This is a huge opportunity to be able to share with you some of our challenges, but where some of the opportunities may be within. I'm going to pull it further. Oh, it's on.
It's on.
Let's try again. Is that good? All right. All right. So no, thank you. So again, I would like to thank you for the invitation to be with you today as we do focus on STEM workforce needs in the federal government. And specifically, what I do want to draw some attention to today is our service, the United States Public Health Service Commission Corps, where there's plenty of opportunities there. As mentioned, I am Reverend Denise Hinton, Deputy Surgeon General of the United States Public Health Service Commission Corps. And next slide, please. Just before I begin to just explain some of the things where our needs are, I just want to provide you with a little information about the United States Public Health Commission Corps, as we are small but not mighty and one of the lesser known of the 8 uniformed services, which does include the United States Army, Marine Corps, Navy, Air Force, Space Force, Coast Guard, and the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration Commission Corps, which is NOAA. We are different from our armed service counterparts, as we are the only service dedicated to protecting, promoting, and advancing the America's Public Health Service, and we serve throughout the United States and abroad. Another unique part of our service is we don't have an enlisted component. The Commission Corps is housed in the United States Department of Health and Human Services and is led by our Assistant Secretary for Health, Admiral Rachel Levine, and also our U.S. Surgeon General, whom you all know also very well, Vice Admiral Vivek Murthy. Our service includes physicians, dentists, veterinarians, dietitians, scientists, nurses, engineers, health service officers, and environmental health specialists, therapists, and pharmacists. It's a great need there. There's plenty of opportunities, and many of them work across the federal governments and with our other federal partners, such as USDA as well. I would say today our public health service officers serve in communities that are most in need by providing health care to underserved and vulnerable populations or advancing practice, policy, and even research. We also serve on the front lines of our nation's greatest health challenges, from responding to Ebola in West Africa to the devastation caused by hurricanes Harvey, Irma, Maria, Michael, and Florence, and many others, and to also help contain the spread of coronavirus and Mpox, which are ongoing emerging infectious diseases. So as you can imagine, the pandemic did bring much demand for our officers and our capabilities, and still continues to do so. This demand pushed our small service to the forefront and helped us to reimagine some of the aspects of our response capabilities just to more adequately meet the needs of our nation, while still providing the support to the underserved communities that were hit hard by the pandemic, such as the Indian Health Service and some of our Alaska Native and tribal populations. As the nation, next slide please, has come out of the public health emergency, we are all aware that the vast healthcare provider shortage, and this shortage not only impacts private businesses and hospitals, but also the public sector. And that's why I'm truly grateful for the opportunity to have this conversation today, as we are all will be, sharing our same challenges, but working with you to identify some opportunities and also to share what the opportunities within our service and our agencies are, so people can join forces with us. Just according to the Health Resources and Services Administration, HRSA's data from August 9th, as a nation, we need to address the following health professional shortage areas. As you can see, we're saying about 17,266 primary care practitioners. We need about 12,288 dental health practitioners and over 8,000 mental health practitioners. As a uniformed service, we are acutely, of course, feeling the shortage as we work to meet the staffing needs of our stakeholders. In statute and by mandate, we are specifically mandated to provide the health services to Indian Health Service, also to Bureau of Prisons, and then we also separately help provide support to ICE and some of the other services in which we're working with. I would say to date, we have approximately 5,700 public health service officers assigned to over 800 sites. These sites range from the Indian Health Service, the Federal Bureau of Prisons, Immigration and Custom Enforcement, Health Services, Food and Drug Administration, the Environmental Protection Agency, Defense Health Agency, and their military treatment facilities, as well as the Veteran Affairs, and many, many more. Our officers provide needed scientific skill sets to these agencies while also maintaining the ability to deploy to serve our nations in time of need. And this is addition to where they might be serving and the missions that they primarily serve across the board. Our officers, also, as with the rest of the healthcare industry, we have some attrition of our officers. We are faced with the same diminishing pool of applicants as our end strength vacillates between 56 to 5,700 at any given point in time over the last year. And as our base, our goal is to maintain the cadre at approximately 6,300. This has caused us to rethink our recruitment strategies and to just increase our recruitment outreach to colleges and universities more actively. This has also, provided us an opportunity to work with our other federal partners and our communities across the board to help push communication and help provide more information about our service and the needs within it. While there is no one size fits all, solution to the health professional shortage, I would say during our recruitment efforts and research, we have noted some key areas to address, as also is noted by our panelists here. To retain healthcare professionals, what we've are highlighting and working towards doing is just addressing the healthcare worker burnout. We know this is a key priority for the Office of the Surgeon General. and our Surgeon General specifically, and working with DHHS and others to do so. We need to make workplaces engines for mental health well-being, ensuring living wages, recognizing members of staff, adding workplace flexibilities where possible. I would say through COVID, we've realized this. Where we were pre-COVID is far different from where we were forced to be during the midst of it and where we are now, as far as, having remote work options, adding more flexibilities, providing and being intentional as leaders and administrators as making sure we provide that work-life balance, because we know folks are juggling a lot, and that contributed to the burnout. And we also need to expand our training opportunities, reimagining workforce and staffing models. Just invest in upskilling staff, cross-training, cross-communication, and just increasing the diversity of workforce and management. We want to also make sure that we're paying attention to and being intentional about enhancing our workplace safety. To recruit new talent, we do want to address the rising cost of trade, college, and professional schools, because for many, it is unattainable, or to return the investment seems too low. The return on investment seems too low. So I think that's where we have some of the funding opportunities that are allotted. One through, I think right now our White House invited administration for some of the work and the grants that were provided to HRSA, but also through some of the fellowship programs or pathway programs, co-steps, senior co-steps, to train and allow access for some of these folks, but also direct training and funding for such. We also need to help collaborate better, we do, with high schools, technical programs, colleges, and universities, just to increase our talent pipeline. We need to improve workplace dynamics to empower employees to recruit high-quality talent. We want them to recognize, too, that they are empowered and they have a place in paying it forward and helping us to recruit, train, and retain great staff within our federal government. We need to also focus on what we can do to recruit internationally and incentivize return to primary care in the face of the burnout. To address race and cultural gaps, we need to adequately fund historically Black medical and professional schools and encourage all work environments to have diversity, equity, and inclusion programs to address two distinct needs of minority populations. As was stated here, in any of our sectors, wherever we work, we know that we have a diverse population in which we live with, we work with, so our workplaces should also mirror that. Next slide. So where does this leave us as a service? Well, we're, of course, actively recruiting for all disciplines, specifically for the clinicians, including nurses and mental health practitioners. We have a huge need for that. We note what's happening across our nation. We have an uptick in some of our tribal populations and the like, well, literally across the globe with suicide clusters and the like. So we need to address that now, but we need to also put some preventative care in places as well. There's, we can see what's happening through climate change and the like. We could see what just happened in Hawaii. There's an increased need, for behavioral health specialists there. But now many of the other perhaps needs as we try to address the huge loss there for our community in Hawaii. We certainly, need a whole of society approach to garner the attention to young people, to encourage and support them to join the healthcare workforce. I would say our youth of today isn't, primarily of what we experienced growing up, and, I would say now kids do feel more empowered and they're more creative about what they want to do, how they want to do it, and are quite vocal and intentional about trying to create that pathway for themselves. So the notion of sometimes service before self is, unique and just something that might be foreign in some aspects, or they want to create what that means for them. So it will certainly take all of us working together, institutional and some policy change for us to adequately address the healthcare worker shortage. And then also whether that be through all of us, and the further with the collaboration as we're talking about today, sharing of search, sharing what's needed, but also sharing what, if you have a surplus of folks applying for positions, if we're able to share that with our other partners here, so that way we can capitalize on the strength that's identified. And then also, we appreciate the time and attention today as we ran into a great need where we, with the rescinding of the ARP dollars and the like, we had a very capable and ready workforce, our public health emergency response strike team, and also we have a ready reserve corps that are essentially at risk because with the rescission of those funds, rescinds the dollars that house these folks to be able to respond to some of our national public health emergencies, which does too impact, our national security as well. So just want to draw attention to what's needed, what we can do to further support the efforts for our workforce and all of ours across the board. So sincerely appreciate your time today and attention, and I look forward to the discussion.
Thank you, Denise. And while we wait for the next presentation, I'll just point out our panelists have talked about opportunities in their agencies. I know in the public health service, there are opportunities, particularly for folks who want to come in as physicians to join that. They can also start to pay back their loans through the government, doing that type of thing. So that service is extremely important. And maybe also we can think about also not only coordinating efforts to getting K through 12, but how do we coordinate efforts about these opportunities that could happen for K through 12? A lot of people don't know about service in USDA or the DOD or the public health service. And finally, talking to the shortage, particularly of minority health professionals, I would say we're trying to do that through the board and NSF with the missing millions. But I would point out how public policy can also shape to the detriment. And that was the report, the Flexner report that came out almost 100 years ago, which impacted. So I would say read that. Because public policy is part of our real responsibility here also on the board. So now we turn to our final panelists. Melinda.
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for allowing me to be a part of this panel today. I've learned so much already. I'm bringing stuff back with me. Of the 6 key findings in the 2023 U.S. Energy and Employment Report, there are 2 that I would like to highlight that point directly to workforce needs. The first one, energy jobs are on the rise. The energy workforce added almost 300,000 jobs from 2021 to 2022 at 3.8% growth, increasing from 7.8 million to 8.1 million. With women accounting for more than half of that growth, posting an 8% increase from the previous year. Second key finding, clean energy technologies are making significant strides with clean energy jobs, increasing by 3.9% nationally and in every state. You can see on the slide what is defined as a clean energy technology, include things such as renewable energy, nuclear energy, biofuels, and more. We need a lot of talent. The fastest growth of any energy technology was in battery electric vehicles, and it increased by 28,000 jobs, 27% growth. Solar and wind comprise 87% of the net new electric power generation jobs, adding over 22,000, which is 3.6% growth. And clean energy jobs made up more than 40% of the total energy jobs in 2022. It is quite clear that the energy sector, including the Department of Energy, have our work cut out for us moving forward, and we need to build. Next slide, please. At the top of this slide, you'll see the 3 job series that are in critical need right now, and obviously not just at the Department of Energy. I think I've heard that from my fellow panelists here. Those are the job series and that are for direct hire right now. And just to remind those that are not familiar, a direct hire authority is an appointing authority that the Office of Personnel Management can give to federal agencies for filling vacancies when a critical hiring need or severe shortage of candidates exists. And so you see those in engineering, physical science, and information technology and cybersecurity. In the middle part of that, you'll see results of a snapshot of active searches for federal jobs at the department in early August. There were 180 open positions. At least 40% of those are STEM or STEM adjacent. And you can see the variation. I heard you say before, electricians to engineers, and those are active searches that are going on right now, along with the ranges of salaries that are there. One of the things that we find is that it's students and others transitioning into the clean energy workforce aren't really aware of all of the positions that are available or how they get to them or what credentials they need. And so on the right, you'll see there's maps, all these different career maps in clean energy for each of those particular subtopics. And those maps don't just tell you what the positions are, it helps students to know what's needed for that, what degree or technical certificates are needed, what the job prices are, what you can make in that, and then how you can move that over, what your path is to that. So those are great maps for students and those transitioning into the clean energy workforce to know what's there. And of course, as a matter of national security, we don't want to forget our national nuclear security enterprise that needs these same positions filled in a critical manner. Many of these positions are also needed at our 17 national laboratories, and those individual labs have done studies on workforce developments in their regions. I sit in the Office of Nuclear Energy, so I can relay specific points about the lab that our office manages, Idaho National Laboratory. Idaho National Laboratory hired a labor economist who really provides workforce projections, labor market analysis, and research, and works to align community college programs to drive expansion of career pathways across all disciplines, prioritizing universities and letting them know what the occupations are that are in most demand now and will be in the future so that students can take that into consideration when they're thinking about what they want to do. INL pays at a competitive market rate in that area, so Idaho Falls. Engineers average $92,000 to $165,000 a year. Hard sciences, $80,000 to $165,000 a year, and technicians average $44,000 to $109,000. Next slide, please. The Undersecretary for Science and Innovation, Dr. Jerry Richmond, formed cross-cut teams to collaboratively address those issues that are of the utmost importance to the department, and STEM is one of those crosscuts. I co-chair that team along with Julie Carruthers in the Office of Science. DOE STEM is a newly coordinated and collaborative effort across the Department of Energy to share, improve, and increase accessibility to all DOE has to offer for training, education, and engagement of STEM students, educators, professionals, and skilled workers. DOE supports a range of STEM training, education, and engagement opportunities that recognize the needs and challenges for creating a future STEM workforce that is agile and innovative. DOE understands that there are many pathways for students and professionals to enter into or advance within the STEM workforce. As such, DOE's efforts are designed to provide a continuum of training and engagement opportunities from the PK-12 level to the skilled technical worker and the PhD trained scientist or engineer level, all aligned with DOE STEM workforce needs, as well as the U.S. workforce development needs that are closely tied to critical DOE mission goals. So I don't know if you all have gone to DOE STEM before. Our STEM opportunities used to be in each of the different offices. And so if you weren't aware of those offices, you didn't really know where to look. And so now it's all in one place. We're really excited about this. We're on the beginning edge of this. We are working with the national laboratories to bring in their opportunities and resources. As you can imagine, that's a really large lift, but we are doing that so that everything in the entire DOE complex will be in one site. As you can see, we have not only opportunities and resources and upcoming events and deadlines, there are participants who have done videos that you can learn about what those jobs are. You can learn about what our offices do. And we just launched an entrepreneurship opportunities page, which is really cool. That we heard that from our users, that students, right, post-grad, and even those that are still in school, were looking for a place to find entrepreneurship opportunities that were concentrated in one place. Workforce is coming soon. It's this panel is very timely. We are in the midst of gathering information for that page as well. So in conclusion, the charter and formation process has begun for the 21st Century Energy Workforce Advisory Board, mandated by the Bipartisan Infrastructure Law, to provide recommendations to the Secretary of Energy on DOE's strategy in support of current and future energy sector workforce needs. And in the Office of Energy Jobs, a new office at the Department of Energy in our Office of Policy, the need to understand our future STEM workforce gaps has been recognized. And although DOE has not had the capacity to do a systematic analysis of specific STEM workforce needs, they do have someone coming soon that will help us focus on that particular piece. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Melinda. And before we start the question and answer, let's give a hand to our panelists for really a lot of great information. The slides will be available on NSB's website. There's slides as well as a video of this panel session. So we have some time for a few questions from our board members here. Also invite you to engage with our panelists because you have been invited for lunch. So if you do stay, we have lunch here and to talk about your questions as well as some of the opportunities that I know some of our board members. So to kick off the question, I have a question for you. And Paul, you started this, but I'd open for anybody. For the needs of what is, your needs, and that's for all of you, but Paul, you kind of started this. What is the balance of efforts NSF, NSB should have with developing domestic STEM talent as well as, and the priority percentage and the focus on international talent, particularly international talent from the global south?
Loaded.
Yeah, you go.
Well, that's a really easy question. I'm a career naval officer, but I did spend quite a bit of time in academia. And what I've witnessed is, you saw earlier in the day, I don't know if the other panelists saw that, that many of our PhDs are international. All right, so if we want to continue that, the trend will go down because, as was stated earlier in the day, those countries are now developing their own universities, and the overall global quality of educational institutions is approaching that of the United States. So we're not going to get those international folks anyway. In my world, in security, I'd rather have U.S. citizens doing it because we're after U.S. citizens. So I think the balance of power is going to change anyway, because as those nations grow their own institutions, we'll get less international participation. So we'd better go figure out what is that balance of U.S. folks. And if we can't get the pipelines going for, again, our postdocs, which I know it's indentured servitude, but we're the Americans in the postdoc world. So
just as a follow on this, there has always been this kind of debate that is there enough domestic talent, and we have to go with international talent. And that sometimes I think you look at different numbers, you get different outcomes. But what's your opinion? Is there enough domestic talent?
Well, I'll get on my high horse here if you let me. I really do feel that there is enough domestic talent. And the challenge is all of us, we're all aging. We don't really have a good approach to Generation Y and Z. But when we motivate those kids, they're amazing. You walked on one of our submarines. Those kids are fantastic folks. Like, how do we get them in? How do we get them interested in serving their country? How do we get them interested in a very, very highly technical and scientific world? Okay, so that's what we need to work on, and it's the baby boomers that need, the problem with our young folks is not them, it's us. And unless we're accessing all the brains, I urge everybody on this board, go to some of the job fairs, go to Black Engineer of the Year Award, go to La Noche de Ciencia, and you'll see these bright kids who really want to go do something, and we're not accessing them.
So I will add that, for example, previous to this position, I was administrator for the Agriculture Research Service, which is we have a couple of thousand PhD scientists, thousands of employees across the country, 4 overseas labs. I cannot hire anyone who is not a U.S. citizen. Yet we train many of them in our academic hallways, in our laboratories, but I couldn't make them a federal scientist. So it's inconsistent across the government. That's not the case at every federal agency, but in the Agricultural Research Service, I could not hire a non-citizen. And then we continue to have the conversation about the balance between national security, and so there are a lot of, I think there's some complexities here. And so I think my colleague Paul touched on a number of them. When I visit some of our minority serving institutions, what I find is that there's a lack of a bridge. And so often awareness is just key. Like you're studying animal sciences at say, for example, a Prairie View A&M University in Texas. You want to become a veterinarian. So what steps do you need to take to do that? When should you start preparing for that? How can we help from the Department of Agriculture perspective build those bridges to those students? We have an effort for increasing the number of minority agricultural economists. The last couple of years showed us how important those people are. So for the people who are upset about the price of their eggs, the cost of chicken wings, baby infant formula, what was the impact of one meat processing facility going down on our country? They play a very critical role in our country, yet they aren't very diverse. And so how do we create those bridges for a student at Florida A&M University studying ag, econ, and undergrad? How do we encourage them to go on to get a master's or a PhD and become, in my case, I would prefer a federal ag economist. But in any case, keep them in these fields. And awareness is where a lot of that's going to occur.
And I think that's a segue. Awareness is it, right? And that communication, we talked about the push communication and then the marketing, right? Where we're probably all tapped for resources, but making sure that's, within that, that's a key priority, because that's how we're going to help educate those that can potentially be in our workforce to know more about our workforce and what the opportunities are there as far as the pathways, where we do have, any of the programs that essentially offers a fellowship and some exposure. Because I'll say for those that are in the underserved communities and the like, a lot of times it's that exposure. Sometimes, if you're in these rural communities or, even in some of the underserved communities, you may not know anyone that has served or worked in any of the fields that we've mentioned here today. So, or have access to go to them to be able to even shadow a person for a day. So how can we make that happen? And be looking collectively across our workforce and our government to ensure that we do that. I know, even from, I have kids, and then I would just say even for, one of my son who is just trying to identify what his career field would be, and he has access, right? It was the exposure. It's being intentional about, finding out what those interests may be and helping to guide, lead, providing them with the mentors, providing those shadowing programs. And then as we're bringing folks in and asking them to apply for our, for our potential roles and jobs. And I think a lot of the times what they're running into is USA Jobs, and how do you navigate that? I tried to do it for them, and I was like, I don't know. And then I need a tutorial. And then secondly, is offer them an opportunity to gain the experience, because what is also happening in many situations and circumstances is we'd love to offer you the opportunity, but we need to we need more experienced staff. And we know that in order to gain the experience, you have to give them the opportunity, provide them the mentorship to grow, because we want our folks to join the service and grow within it. And I would say that's from our civilian side, but our uniformed services side as well.
I'll kind of add on to that as well. So mentorship is very important, and it's hard to be a mentor, right? Because it takes a lot of time if you're doing it the right way. So what about another piece of that could introduce students to all of these opportunities? And I think we need to leverage the federal STEM workforce and the interns and the fellows and help them understand how to be a role model in what they're doing and have them talk about it. One of our internships at Department of Energy, one of the pieces in their contract is they have to volunteer for an hour to be able to go out to students and talk about what they do. But then you have to give them the support to do that, because not everybody is comfortable doing that. I also want to talk about awareness, right? So in a lot of the communities that I've been in over the last 8 years, people just don't know. And they really don't know Department of Energy. I will just be honest and tell you that, which is one of the things we hope DOE STEM starts to change. But helping students be aware of what's out there, what's possible, and actually meeting them where they are, right? So going to the different, someone said conferences, right? Job fairs. And don't just go and be a part of it. Volunteer for the poster session. Talk to the students at the American Indian Science and Engineering Society. If you go to and participate with the posters, you talk to the students one-on-one, see what their interests are, right? Maybe guide them to other opportunities, but then you also turn around, and a lot of times there are family there as well. And so you're building that bridge and making those relationships.
Paul, you had a follow-up comment?
Yeah, so I'm sitting on a board with 3 women. Okay. Part of our world is retention. Part of retention is counseling and mentorship. Okay. I'd like each of my panel mates to tell you all what their mentoring workload is.
Well, I think we could, that would be something over lunchtime, because you've given some ideas, and the ideal factory is NSF with its leader, Ponch. And one of the things maybe is if all of you would agree to do your own videos, which he could post on the NSB website or NSF website, which people can see, as well as I would encourage my other colleagues. Julia, you had your hand up.
Yes, thanks very much, and thank you for a most provocative panel. I was going to ask you, what is the top priority? There's so many different steps that are required and so many things that need to be done to address the shortfalls we're dealing with here. But I think maybe a little more focus is in order. You've already talked about some of the very top priorities. And that would be if you could ask the Science Board to engage in one way to help address this issue, what would that way be?
I'll start. Just for an example, the Next Gen program that I mentioned, the $262.5 million to minority serving institutions. The vision is that that's going to touch some 20,000 kids. My dream would be that each one of those 20,000 kids had an opportunity to intern in a laboratory, to be mentored by someone, to be able to shadow an individual, and so the chance to partner and touch each one of those 20,000 kids. And I'll just quickly share that I had a professor ask me in undergrad, senior year in a lab, had I thought about graduate school? I had not. I didn't even know it was an option. And I wouldn't be here today for that one just incidental conversation to him, but instrumental to me. And so if we could have each one of those 20,000 kids working and meeting people like yourselves and creating those bridges for those opportunities, if possible, that would be an amazing priority that I think would help a lot.
Sneak in another question here. Ponch, you had a question?
Yeah. Thank you so much. I mean, I just want to say, Undersecretary Young, it's been a pleasure working with USDA. You are our major partner in AI institutes, 5 of them. We look forward to continuing to work with you, and I'm excited by your $262.5 million commitment. I think that's great because Vice Chair McCrary constantly reminds how we can work with agencies, so that's a very good point. To Vice Admiral Sullivan, great, I mean, fantastic panel, by the way. And the granted program of NSF, I want you to check that out, because that addresses precisely what you're talking about in terms of building capacities on research administrators, things of that nature in institutions that don't have that capacity for helping with writing proposals, things of that nature. So I just wanted to draw that out. To Adam Hinton and Director Higgins, you know, you put up these data points that is so phenomenal. I mean, the salary structures that you're putting up there, and I'm like, wow. But the problem is that we don't have our kids in high school who can even, you know, sort of have this data point in front of them. You know, in our award ceremony, one of our awardees made the point, and I thought it was very powerful, where he went to schools, inner city schools, and talked about the kind of salaries that is available if you achieved this, right? And in contrast to other things that they get into sometimes. So this, I think, is important for us also. Yes, absolutely, mentorship is important, internship is important, entrepreneurship is important, all of that is important. But I think the fact that we are not exposing our children to what they can achieve, because dollars do mean something at that age, for them to get motivated as one additional motivation. So we should really work on this together to see what we can do to do that. Thank you.
Before I go to the next question and you get a chance to answer, your presentation, because I did some calculation, and you know, high voltage electrician, when you turn the hourly rate, that's $110,000 to $154,000 a year. That's not chump change, okay? And there's a lot of people out here who could get into those opportunities. And when we talk, but a lot of kids do not understand that, as well as a lot of parents who sometime when we were doing the skilled technical workforce were pushing their kids around through the college pathway, when really, had they known about these opportunities, they'd do that. And that's not putting college down. It's like there's just many on and off ramps to a good life. Suresh Garamella.
Yeah, thank you for the presentations. You know, you've talked about cleaning up websites and how terrible they are. I think that's great, but that implies people are coming and looking at your websites. I don't think they are. And so the word is not getting out there. I think that's part of what Punch said, right? We can do it's, you can push all you want, but there's not the pull from the other side. Chavonda, you talked about building bridges, right? And activating this, the domestic talent that Paul believes we do have. I think the challenge is what Melinda said, which is to get out there, meet them where they are, but doing this at scale. 3 conferences, 4 conferences, 6 of you, it's not going to do it, right? So I guess I'm wondering what your organizations are doing to expand that scale somehow by building partnerships. By building partnerships, I mean, like on steroids, sorry, Surgeon General. Really, I mean, sort of expanding that massively so that I guess to provide this information, but also I guess I will challenge you to say, by asking you, if this truly is the crisis we all think it is, what are your organizations doing to set aside funds to, in your budgets, right, to support this engagement, setting up fellowship programs to support university students, engaging with K through 12 schools, and possibly, for example, feeding into the NSF graduate research fellowship thing, right? It's a great program. We always have massive numbers of applicants and can give out like 3,000 or some such number. So there are ways of expanding this, but I think we can talk about this all we want. But I feel like a portion of these budgets need to be set aside to address this as a crisis it is. Thank you.
Thank you for that point. And I would say, one, we have a whole Department of Health and Human Services, but in speaking for the Public Health Service Commissions Corps specifically, we ask for our funding, of course, through Congress and the like. So what we're working very hard to do is to continue to educate the Hill on our needs and on our service. And that way, there's some equity with our services, as far as the funding goes, as with our armed service, as far as addressing the workforce needs. And then, so I would say with that, ensuring that there's funding that's dedicated, one, for the recruitment, but also accessions and incentives and the like, and having that line item to support such. And I would say within that, the Public Health Service, as we are within the Department of Health and Human Services, and then we also are aligned, I would say, respectfully speaking, sometimes with the with political agendas and the like. So wanting to ensure that the service itself is looked upon as a separate entity from that, to bipartisan service focused on serving the mission and the health of our nation as a whole, and being known for that, and us doing a better job, but hopefully having the Hill and others understand what that value is as we serve right alongside with DOD. You know, we serve directly to serve our underserved populations across the globe, and that's including our officers that are at the CDC in Atlanta, that are directly in Africa, you know, on the front lines. So just want to continuing to highlight some of those pieces. And then also focus on having funds to talk about retention, so we're able to keep our excellent officers and even our civilian staff on board, so we continue to help grow them and provide the training, funding to support their training for that professional, that career growth, and having those opportunities as a whole.
So we have time for about 2 more questions. Marvi?
Thank you so much. Thanks for all the ideas. We have discussed the importance of motivating students across school ages, you know, all school stages. The 3 questions I'm going to ask, they're in a funnel structure.
Just
so,
one.
so it's going to be very fast. But this is related to security and national security talent. So I thought it was important. You know, what do you believe is needed to create a holistic strategy across multiple agencies, not just having a strategy per agency? What do you believe should be the role of all federal agencies in funding STEM education at all levels? And then how can each agency, this is more a tactic, right? How can each agency incentivize education, undergraduates and PhDs education, as much as the technology outcome is incentivized in grant funding? Thank you.
Well, I'm just going to I'm going to do a media training trick, and I'm going to answer the question I had hoped to be asked. And I will share with you, and I hope this will touch on some of the points that you've mentioned. You know, USDA is a federal partner to the entire land grant university system. So that's part of our mission. It's what we do. I still have a list mosquito bites from University of Alaska Fairbanks 2 weeks ago. You know, we were in the College of Menominee Nation the week before that, Kansas State University. So this is what we do. We're on the campuses, and what we heard from the presidents when we met with, for example, the 1890 presidents, is that we need to be present on campus, that they need to see us other than times when we're looking for something, you know, and so we want to do that one time a year job announcement and visit the campus. They need more than that. And I love this idea about salaries, because we don't often talk about salaries. Right. It's just not discussed. You know, they need to know, if you do this, this is what because it changed my life. I will share with you that I went to the FFA convention. That's the Future Farmers of America. It's my first time in Indianapolis, Indiana. 75,000 in attendance. And I walked through their exhibit hall, and one of the things that was different than the other meetings that I've gone to, you had an entire row of welding schools. The national vice president of FFA announced that his goal, his dream, is to have his own welding company. And this was new to me, because I had not been exposed to this whole technical, the trade part of it. It's very well accepted in that group. It's not very diverse. It's not very diverse. And I had a chance to stand on a stage in the stadium where the Indianapolis Colts play. Felt like Beyonce on that stage. But share with them how important it was to try to diversify and be more inclusive, because they were offering scholarships on the spot there for many different organizations. there weren't a lot of people, children of color there. How do we build those bridges? And so that happens when we're on those campuses in collaboration, in communication at all times. And they need to see people that look like me. They need to see people that look like everybody at this table, because this is what a scientist looks like.
So Linda, get ready, because you're going to have the last question, and I'm going to give it to Scott. But before I say that, one idea may be for also NSF, so I'm giving you more work, Ponch, besides getting cameos and videos of these folks so they can see people and kids can see these folks and the folks around the table and say, yeah, I can too be that. You might also, because we have an advanced technological education program, and Dr. Celeste Carter, who's might be in the back and you might get to meet over lunch, has funded a welding school. NSF is there. We have done that. And so maybe also NSF, we could show a list of trade schools on NSF site, okay, and really connect, because if we say the STW is part of the STEM workforce, I come from a place, it's not what you say, but it's what you do. So I think if what we do, that can help. So Scott, you have the last question, and Melinda, get ready up. You're up in the batter's box.
You can answer me over lunch. We've danced around my question here, and that was all of you, I think, raised the non-degreed, highly skilled technical workforce, dearth. And what, if anything, in your organizations regarding programs, apprenticeships, anything like that, are you doing to help fill that?
So can I, oh, go ahead. Paul, you want to go? Okay. So we need all of those positions. We need that welding school. We need everyone from there. We need the electricians. And so one of the things that I did want to point out kind of in the past question is what the agency's doing. We're working more with communities now, right? So the Loan Programs Office out of the Department of Energy, they have a community benefits plan that really is starting to tie the workforce, right, and apprenticeship roles with the work from that office. We also have, in just my office, a consent-based siting plan where we're working with partners all across the United States, including K-12. And I do have to advocate for K-12. I was trying to do that a little bit ago. As a teacher of 22 years, you want to get to students, you get to the teachers, and you help them. And I benefited from the Research Experience Teachers for program that NSF funds, and it was amazing. And I can go on and on about lunch about that. But so working with communities and really building those relationships. So DOE doesn't have funding specifically other than National Science Bowl for K-12, but we know how important this is. And so you have to get out there and work with the teachers and work with communities. I really want to emphasize that community piece, because building those relationships and then treasuring and making sure you stay with the people in those communities is really important.
So, thank you all for this energetic conversation. And I will say we'll go on into lunch because our guests are there. We look forward to continuing this conversation over lunch with our panelists. And I challenge everyone, if you're going to, walk the walk, besides just talking the talk, let's get the contact information. Let's try to work and put our collective talents together. The data insights that you all have shared with us today have been excellent and extremely provocative, I will tell you. They will inform the board as it works with NSF and stakeholders to grow the diverse domestic STEM talent workforce needed both long and short term in this country. We will take these insights into much of the board's efforts, including SEP's talent development team, policy work, and that of the External Engagement Committee. Thanks again to our wonderful panelists for their thought-provoking presentations, work on this crucial issue. Let's give them another round of applause.